So the first option is add a domain controller to an existing domain. This one is used when you have already a domain or a DNS server and you want to create a domain controller, or if you want to create a high availability for your domain controller, we choose this option. So you already have your DNS server and domain name, or you have your domain controller and you want to create new one for high availability. So this is the first option. The second option is add a new domain to an existing forest. So this option here, let me try to resize this one. So this add a new domain to an existing forest. So we assume that you have an enterprise, for example, in Australia, another enterprise in America, USA. So Australia, USA. And here you have, for example, the domain .com, and then here USA.com. So this add a new domain to an existing forest mean that you have already your domain controller here, your DNS server, your domain, and you create a domain controller. And you have as well here DNS server and domain controller and users. And then you want to create a trust relationship between these two domains. And when you create trust relationship and enable another feature, call it global catalog, then this user that will be here will be synchronized to this domain and vice versa. And this one, because for example, if this user, for example, call it Abdlali, is working in the USA, right? And then he traveled to the Australia company and he want to authenticate. So it's very it will be take too much long time to authenticate, to traverse the network. It will be a latency. So instead of that, I want this user to authenticate from the server that is close to him. So when he will try to authenticate, he will use this server instead of this domain controller. Means he will use this domain controller instead of this domain controller. And the last one is add a new forest. For example, you are the first time you are going to create your DNS server and you will create your domain controller. So this is your first time you will create a domain controller. So we'll choose this option and they will call it abdali.local. Then you will click on next. Then we'll enter the password. As you can see here, the same steps that we have followed when we try to create our AWS managed Microsoft ID in our AWS directory service. We'll enter the password and or not BIOS. It will generate that for us. Click on next. This is the databases where our user will be stored. Click on next. Next. Yes, a delegation for DNS server be created because the authoritative parent zone cannot be found. Here the steps, yes, I have to explain it, because when you try or when you want to install the Active Directory that contains the domain controller, that server must have a DNS before you install that Active Directory. But if you try to install the Active Directory, the Active Directory will try to install a DNS server if it is not exist already. So this option here, that's what means. Then install. So I will stop. I will pause the video until the installation finish, and the system will be rebooted, right? So it will be rebooted. So we have to wait a little bit. Now if I try to connect to it again, try to connect. Browse, upload my PIM file, and decrypt the password. Copy this here. Click on yes. So this server and this domain controller I have shown you here, you have to install it on your local environment, on your data center, not on AWS, right?